are online at that time, but it's good to see that you've come to the platform early, and welcome to the meeting. And we'll start at 11, as I said.
Thanks, Prof.
Yeah. The background is terrible.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Said if you need to speak, you need to unmute yourself. And it's coming to 11. So hopefully we have 25 participants that have logged on to the meeting. And I'm hoping that more people join the meeting soon, because we had more than 100 people registered for this meeting today. And it could be that we start because it's 11 already, so that we don't have to delay. I'm hoping that the rest of the people can join us in good time. I'm hoping that you all can see the program on the screen at the moment. And from the email that we sent you, we thought that's important for us to join the rest of the world as we celebrate the World Press Freedom Day by organizing this meeting at which we speak on various issues, and we try and share experiences from the countries that are represented in this meeting. Let me say that my name is George Nyabuga. I'm a member of the Kenya Editors Guild Executive Committee, but I also teach at the University of Nairobi. I will be the moderator for today's session. So welcome all to the meeting. I'm hoping that you all can hear me.
Yes, George. I can hear you.
Very
Yes,
good. Very
yeah.
Confirmed. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. As we As you saw from the write-up that we sent you, this year's global theme for the World Press Freedom Day is journalism without fear or favor. And this is especially important because we dealing with issues of press freedom, but not only press freedom, but freedom of expression. And here, the issues of independent media and independent journalism are particularly important in a time like this when we're dealing with COVID-19, but also when reflecting on various crises that various countries go through from time to time.
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay. So the meeting is started, and I was just making a quick introduction on why it is that we've organized this event today. As I was saying, this is part of celebrating the World Press Freedom Day, and we've organized this meeting to reflect on the practice of journalism within very broad theme, the global theme for today's World Press Freedom Day, which is journalism without fear or favor. And just to maybe quote quickly, Thomas Jefferson, I think it's a president that we all like to quote, but we know why. And maybe there are two very popular quotes. And the first one that our liberty depends on the press, on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. And the more popular one is that were it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government, I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. And I think in that context, we will try and interrogate matters relating to journalism without fear or favor. What does it mean in the context of COVID-19, but also in the context of the kind of threats that we see in the region, where journalists have oftentimes have to deal with issues of their own safety and security, and issues relating to the survival of the media, especially in tough economic times like what we have at the moment. We have a list of distinguished speakers from different countries, as you see on the program that is on your screen at the moment. We hope that the meeting will last 2 hours, but we may have to extend this maybe for a few more minutes if you allow us to do that. We hope, though, that the meeting will be finished by 1:30 at the very latest. And maybe without further ado, let me welcome the president of the Kenya Editor Guild to make some remarks. And just a quick housekeeping rules, please mute your mic. I can mute everyone, but I think it's important that people mute themselves. And if you want to speak, please unmute yourself, but also on the left hand side of the screen of your screen, you should see a hand, and you can press on that hand to either raise or lower your hand. I know that you want to speak, and it will also that you raised your hand, so I'll be able to notice that you. All right, shall I mute everyone? And if you want to, because I think there's a bit of interference. So I've muted everyone except myself because we have a bit of interference from some participants. We're not going to close the meeting yet because we expect more people to come. We currently have 37 participants, people that have logged on to this platform. So anyway, shall I welcome the president of the Kenya Editors Guild to make his opening remarks. Churchill?
Thanks, Professor. Um, Colleagues, good morning. Can Georgia see yourself speaking? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can
Yes,
hear
you
you.
can.
Thank you. Thanks very much. May I first take this chance to wish ourselves and our colleagues, some of whom, as you know, are busy in the newsrooms, trying to put out material for today and tomorrow. Many others who probably on their way coming to join us, and many others in the world. Um, as we celebrate this day, we remember them and we remember ourselves for staying this course and trying to do that which matters for our society. Many amongst us have had to pay fairly significant prices. Some even paid the ultimate price to do that which we seek to do. But we remain steadfast and committed that this is important for our society and it is important for humanity, and somebody must do it. And we are here, and I believe it's important that we keep that we stay that course. I'd also like to celebrate key editors in Ethiopia, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Kenya, and of course colleagues in Rwanda, South Sudan, and Somalia, who have made this meeting possible, because this conversation needs to be had so that we do find a meeting point in terms of how we deal with issues that affect our profession in the region. Depending on the spaces that each of us occupy, sometimes those issues are different. Sometimes they're easy, other times they're very difficult. But somebody, and this time ourselves, must do this job. And I want to encourage ourselves that we remain committed, and not just committed for ourselves, but to also mentor colleagues and friends to join this cause. We wouldn't be able to gather today if it were not for support from friends like at UNESCO and at the Open Society in East Africa, and I'd like to also acknowledge their support in this struggle. They've enabled us to first be able to put our thoughts together as we are doing this morning, but also to challenge a few of us to distill these thoughts in a lot more elaborated ways into a publication that the East Africa Editors Forum will be embarking on fairly shortly to try and make sure that the ideas we have to respond to the reality of journalism today are ideas that are distilled and are shareable to a much bigger audience. Just 6 things I wanted to highlight as a way of setting us off before we get into the substantive discussions. And it's just a question of when it comes to public journalism in Eastern Africa, what are some of the areas, some of the issues we need to keep in mind as we forge ahead? And I've given this some thoughts, and I wanted to share some 6 ideas with you. The first one, and I think is a no-brainer for many of us editors, is that journalism is not worth anything unless we drive the whole issue of accountability reporting. Yeah, and in today's world, that probably is more important than ever. That verification and giving those who don't have voices some voice is ultimately the most important thing we can ever do. Depending on the spaces we are in, some of us might find it a bit easier than others, but that for me must remain the pillar on which everything else hangs. The second one for me, and it's one that might be, as journalists and as editors, haven't done a good job of, but probably time has come for us to just reconsider, is that we must build structures and grow a fraternity of professionals who care about accountability reporting. Yeah, and we do that by building associations, by making sure that the contexts, the legal and policy context in which we are enabling for those who choose to do ethical journalism to thrive and survive. I think it's our duty. We cannot cede that to anybody else, because if that those structures, if that context is not there, our work becomes even more and more difficult. The third thing is that journalism is not an issue for journalists only. Yeah, it is an issue for society at large. And in society, there are many people who've come up to be defenders or even change agents, if you like, promoting freedom of expression. I think a time has come when we have to look at those change agents and those defenders with a friendly eye, so that we have a lot more people making and contributing and delivering the right message, so that those forces, those who feel that they're powerful, who feel that they have the resources, or even the violence, the means of violence to try and clamp on free media, increasingly end up being in the minority. I think that's important. Then number 4, and talking to friends in across all our countries, and indeed across the world, it is true that disruption, economic and digital, is squeezing the media space or the newsrooms, if you like, in fairly significant ways. And that unless we find ways to innovate and push back, then we're going to be squeezed out of our space, and other charlatans will take over those spaces. But many times, that innovation is driven by cadres and disciplines in the media, but not so much by ourselves as editors. Many of us haven't found time and space to take ownership, to take charge of that agenda. I just wanted to urge ourselves that innovation is a good thing, but it's also risky, because depending on the values that whoever is driving innovation believes in, they can easily, mess up the soul of what we care about. So we will need to think of how is it possible for us to recover that space and take charge of it. The second last one is that regulation, and we see new laws coming out of Ethiopia, we see new laws coming out of Tanzania, and laws and regulations are being used to try and, basically make official very repugnant media policies. And we have to find ways to make sure that conversation is had in the public domain, but also informed by progressive benchmarks. And then finally, and probably a critical one, given this pressure our media is in now, is the whole question of how should journalism be funded? Yeah, in many of our spaces, this question is left a lot of time to marketers, is left to accountants, or generally managers who are not newsroom people. I feel strongly that how journalism is funded is the editor's duty. The others just come to help in that journey, but ultimately, what monies flow into our spaces and how they are applied to make sure that we can report and also to defend and make sure that it doesn't contaminate the editorial space is really our duty. If it means our journalism schools teaching us how to do finance, teaching us how to run companies, I think so be it. But that's a responsibility that we really must keep. In my honest opinion, those 6 things constitute the frontiers that we must look at going forward. I thank you, and I'm happy to be in this conversation.
Thank you very much, President of Kenya Editors Guild. And he's mentioned a few things, one of them being media sustainability. I think it's important that we look at this issue critically to see how the media can be funded and how journalism can be funded to ensure that it remains independent. As we know, oftentimes the bottom line is critical to not only the survival of the media and journalism, but the bottom line becomes important in how the media covers certain issues and its ability to withstand various pressures. So whether it's economic pressure or it's a political pressure. So we will have time to maybe engage with what Churchill has talked about. And from the program, and I've seen Masharia saying that we need to take down that screen, and we'll take it down in a few moments. But from the program, I'm hoping that you all can see it or that you saw it. We have 3 more sessions after the president's opening remarks. We have a session on journalism during the COVID-19, and the second session is on the safety of journalists. And the third session is what we call the way out. And at the end, we will have closing remarks, and all of us then should be involved in talking about the way forward. Where do we want to go from here? And to help us maybe set the scene further, we will invite Nancy Nyambura, who's currently a staff psychologist with Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. Talk about the media and the issue of COVID-19 in Eastern Africa. And as we said yesterday, I think we don't have much time, so we will ask the speakers to summarize their presentations to about, utilize about 7 minutes to make their presentations. We will share the presentations with participants later, but at the moment we ask the presenters to just summarize their presentations. Welcome, Nancy. The floor is yours. Is Nancy here?
Hello, George, if you allow me.
Yes.
This is Judy Waguma, actually from MSF.
Oh, Judy.
Yes, Nancy was invited for this, but then I think things have not really settled down well in terms of her representation of MSF within the region. And the initial idea was her to talk about also what MSF is doing, as well as talk about the psychosocial support in terms of how journalists and say doctors as frontline offenders, how can they, defenders, sorry, how can they protect themselves in that sense. But MSF right now is responding to, or rather preparing for any case for, during this pandemic. And now it's in, MSF is in Tanzania, South Sudan, Ethiopia, as well as Kenya. And what it's doing basically is to put preventive measures in all its projects in order to be able to isolate and refer any suspected patients to the government facilities. Well, the main concern MSF has right now is the vulnerable populations and also crowded places like Dadaab, Kakuma. If at all this disease or rather COVID-19 will be able to penetrate these communities. I'll just give a brief of that's really basically what MSF is doing, and just covering up for Nancy briefly, but we can work again with Churchill to organize for a proper session this going forward. Thank you.
All right, Judy, continue. You will have about 6 or so minutes to make the presentation then on behalf of Médecins Sans Frontières.
So what we have right now is that COVID-19 was declared an emergency January 2020. And then after that, there's been a global transmission, and then WHO declared this disease a pandemic on the 11th of March. If we see the situation in numbers, Africa right now is rising to about 26,000 cases within the region and about 973 deaths. So in terms of MSF's understanding of the disease is that it's still evolving, and the latest estimates are that 80% of the people who get infected will mainly suffer a mild or moderate form of the disease, and 15% will develop severe forms of the disease and will need hospitalization, with 5% critically ill. So the main risk now is older people and also people who are whose immunity are compressed. Then again, we all know how it's spread through coughing of sick people and also by people with no or almost no symptoms. This does not necessarily mean that the disease is more contagious, but it makes it just a bit harder to get a good picture of the way it's spreading. So in East Africa, we can see that Somalia is really the hardest hit country. With the last I checked, it was about 500 and something cases. I don't know if it's gone up today. And then Tanzania has about 480 and 300. I don't know if we've gotten to 400 in Kenya. Then what MSF is doing for this is to prepare, put preventive measures in all its projects, because right now the main message is like we prevent the disease before it spreads further, because we're looking at the capacity Kenya has in terms of its healthcare, managing the patients if the spread would reach, vulnerable populations or crowded or informal settlements. That's the main concern. So now what it's doing is in putting hand wash points, doing health promotion, providing protective equipment to the staff, because the priority right now is also to ensure that the staff are well protected. Because we can see that East Africa is already grappling with a lot of humanitarian challenges, such as conflicts, displacement, and large populations living in informal settlements. Also looking at the fragile system, and also the main concern as well is to protect people most at risk of this disease. And also looking at the consequences of lockdown and restrictions. Does it really help within the region? In terms of treatment, there's no treatment at the moment, only supportive management. There are various vaccines and other organizations trying to develop vaccines that would work within globally, because this is a global effect. Most patients, as I mentioned earlier, about 80% will suffer minor illness and some recover. Then that's really in a brief nutshell on what MSF is doing. And also because I'm not a doctor, I won't go deeper into the medical activities and all that. Now what MSF is really keen on is to ensure that all the projects that are running, so that patients are able to come to the facility, but also preparing to ensure that if at all there's any suspected case, then the referral is made fast. Yeah, that's all from my side. Again, we can organize a proper session with the medical doctor and also Nancy, who's the psychosocial expert in this area. Thank you, George.
All right. Thank you very much, Judy. And I'm told that Nancy is here. Actually, Nancy, maybe we give Nancy a few moments to speak.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad that she could join. Thank you.
Yes. And I will, I hope everyone can hear me. Someone says, Nancy, my microphone is on now. And apart from Nancy, there's also Roland Kaya. So I'll give an opportunity to Nancy and Roland to speak. First, we give the floor to Nancy. Please, Nancy.
Sorry, it's Sophie here. It's actually Roland who will be speaking first. Thank you.
Already, okay.
Roland, you should be on the call now.
Sorry,
Okay.
George.
Okay, Roland, please.
Hi, everyone. How do you hear me?
If speakers can turn on the video so that we see who is speaking. I'm sorry I said the
Okay.
president, but I turn on mine earlier.
It's okay.
All right, Roland, you have the floor. Please turn on your video so that we can see you.
Yes, do you see me now?
Yes, continue speaking.
Okay. So I'm sorry to join a bit late. I think that I missed the time because I was supposed to join around 11:30. Just checking with you. Are you listening to me loud and clear?
I think everybody can hear you. Yes, Roland.
Okay, thank you. So the video is also on. Unfortunately, I don't know if you see me or not. It could be connection issues. Yeah.
I think we can. At least I can see you, and I think everybody can see you. I think.
Okay, thank you. So just to say something about MSF first, I think most of you know that MSF as Médecins Sans Frontières is this medical organization which was created in 1971 over Biafra War by doctors and journalists. So it's a quite old organizations and working in the humanitarian medical sector. About the COVID, actually, globally, as we all know, the confirmed number of cases has gone up to more than 3 million people, and the death toll, we are talking about more than 200,000 people. But also we should not forget about people who have recovered from this disease, and we're talking about more than 1 million people. For now, the pandemic is more on European and US side. However, that doesn't exclude other parts of the world, including Africa, where we are and where we have seen also quite some cases coming up. For Africa, globally, we're talking about more than 30,000 cases confirmed. Amongst those 30,000, we have like 1,400 cases who have passed away, and also more than 10,000 people who have recovered, which is also a good news. So what we see is that there were a lot of prediction in terms of how the pandemic would evolve in Africa. However, the prediction has gone different from what we see now. So the curve are not following what was predicted. We're predicting a bit more patients to come up. Luckily, it's not the case for now. And I think it's too early at the moment to say why this is happening, and also we cannot say much about what would be the future. Nonetheless, the future is that we would like to see that the number of cases still remain low and more recovered. From MSF side, I think the concerns are more about the health system, which are fragile in the areas. So looking at the burden which we've come up with this pandemic, looking at the health system, the health services already provided on ground, which were lacking support from for different factors, which we already know. This could be a big issue, and MSF is quite concerned about this. The second is about the safety of staff. As we speak, we can say that more than 280 people who have been affected by this COVID in Africa. We're talking about health workers. So frontline health workers are the most exposed, and their safety is key to maintain already existing health system and health services, and also to be able to fight against the COVID. we have also concerns about people living in precarious situations like refugees, IDPs in those congested areas where they don't have enough space to exercise some measures, infection prevention and controls, or like social distancing. This is quite difficult. And this is a key concern, and we hope that most of actors will be able to fight and work together to make sure that this specific group of people who are vulnerable already from the situation could get the best support for during this pandemic. And the last one, not the least, because we have a long list, time being limited, is about people living with some diseases. So we're talking about immunosuppressed people. I think already the burden in our countries in Africa is high, and so adding the COVID could be quite detrimental for them. So it would be quite essential that health workers and other actors, media, and whoever could contribute in any way, because fighting a pandemic like this is not about health only, it's about the multi-sectorial activities, collaborations, and this could be one of the main focus which all actors should put on. I think that is all I would say for now, but as we go, if there is any questions or more comment to make, we will be provided. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, Roland. And I think we shall engage you more during the question and answer session. And I think a lot has been said about what MSF is doing, and especially how it's collaborating with the various media houses and the media to try and advance freedom of the media and freedom of expression. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. And now just to move on to other issues, I would like to invite Daniel Kalinaki. He's the chairman of the Uganda Editors Guild, to speak on, how the media survives or performs in such tough economic times. And the question that Kalinaki responds to is, can the media survive the economic ravages of the pandemic? Daniel, the floor is yours, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I hope you can hear me. Thanks, Churchill, for putting this together and for your kind of broad take. I think we all recognize that this crisis comes at a time when the media are dealing with a longer term crisis of revenue and profitability. If you look at the newspaper market, it peaked around the turn of the millennium, and print circulation has been falling since then. Advertising revenue across all media platforms peaked around the time of the financial crisis, so around 2008, and has actually been dropping since then. So it's the perfect storm at a time when media houses across the world have been trying to reinvent themselves. Then comes something that basically decimates print circulation in markets that rely on people picking up newspapers from vendors rather than home deliveries. But even in markets that require home deliveries because of the fear of infection and basically the lockdowns, that those have been affected. The advertising revenue as well has disappeared in most markets and formats because of the slowdown in business activity and the fear. One of the first things that people do cut when there is a crisis is advertising and marketing spend. How has this manifested itself? We have seen closures of newspapers and some outfits. In Uganda, for instance, the Observer newspaper stopped printing its weekly edition. We snowballed our own sports weekly newspaper. And if you look across the continent, there's been the smaller newspapers in particular are struggling to just stay alive. There have been layoffs of journalists and other people who work in media houses as a result of the slowdown in the business. And we're seeing reductions in salaries for journalists. Traditionally not the best paid profession anyway, but we're having to take pay cuts in several markets, Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, and so on and so forth. So there's long-term pain for the industry, and now we have come into an existential crisis. My sense is that there are two ways to look at the current problem. The first is that it's probably going to accelerate the death of many smaller media houses. So the smaller newspapers, the media houses that do not have diversified sources of revenue. So if you just a print media house without, for instance, radio, without television, I think those are going to suffer a lot. If you look at the circulation figures from the Audit Bureau of Circulations in South Africa, the trend from around 2015 is downwards, year on year, quarter on quarter, in newspapers, dailies, in weekend newspapers, in weekly newspapers, in magazines. So print on the ropes, and very few will survive for a long time after this crisis. But it also presents an acceleration for those that have been working on kind of digital strategies. This then creates a push, it pushes the boat out faster into the sea, and those that I think are better prepared will survive. Others will flounder and probably end up underwater. So the way I see it, there is a test now of the underlying business model of especially mainstream media, because this crisis has exposed our reliance on old models, for instance, selling newspapers on the streets, but also our very high reliance on advertisers. So I think you're going to have to see a business model that depends more on getting money from our customers and by selling them our product in digital formats. I think the other thing is that we're going to see probably a test of whether we can renew our social contract with our audiences, in terms of whether people trust us after this crisis, whether they still see the need for viable, independent media houses. I think Churchill said something about journalism is not just for journalists. I think the conversation on how to fund public interest journalism needs to happen, because what we have is private interests paying for a public good. And it is very clear now that that social contract and that business model is under threat. So in summary, we've had a long-term problem of trying to stay in business, since the turn of the millennium as the digital disruption happened. I think now we have a dual problem: one, to stay in business, and how to stay in journalism itself. Thank you.
Very much, Daniel, for that presentation. As I said, hold on to your questions. We shall give you an opportunity to ask any question. But Daniel has raised very important issues relating to existential challenges that are facing the media, and whether we need to renew post COVID-19, but also during this COVID-19 crisis, whether we need to renew the social contract that we have with audiences rather than maybe consumers, if we look at it from a commercial media perspective. Okay, moving on quickly. I think now we invite Zacharias Sintayeu, the editor-in-chief of The Reporter in Ethiopia. Zacharias, please, the floor is yours. You're going to speak on the Ethiopian newsroom story in relation to COVID-19 pandemic. Zacharias.
Thank you very much, George. I hope everyone is listening to me. I'm very honored to speak on this platform. I'm, like you said, I'm the editor-in-chief of Reporter, one of the biggest and the oldest private news paper in Ethiopia. We have been in the business for more than quarter of a century. So without further ado, I'll just jump into my presentation for today, World Press Freedom Day. So I'll speak on COVID-19, a view from Ethiopian newsroom. So as it's stated, the spread of COVID presented an unexpected challenge to the world. So that's being the case, we have like more than 3.4 million cases, and the death toll is more than 240,000 people. So this pandemic poses a threat to the societies by challenging the social, economical, and political systems throughout the world. So the media is not an exception. So this sector is also being challenged by this global pandemic very harshly. So I will speak on three aspects of the impact of this pandemic. The first one is on the economic impact. The second one is the reporting challenge and the safety of journalists from Ethiopian perspective. So when we talk about the economic impact, the dwindling advertisement revenue presents an extraordinary challenge to the existence of the money newsrooms. So advertising revenues fall down by more than 60%, and it's predicted that it will continue on a downward spiral. This is according to a private media consultant firm in Ethiopia. In specific, particularly to our case in our newsroom, the advertisement revenue has been slashed fall down by more than 15%, and two of our print products, the monthly English and monthly Amharic magazines, are out of publication for the time being. We're only being online, but the newspaper is there. So this nosedive of advertisement poses a psychological threat on journalists as well. From Ethiopian perspective, we don't hear any layoff for the time being, but one media TV station is giving forced leave for its staff, and this is, created some fear among the staffs for job security. But so far, there's no layoff in Ethiopian media, but the media organizations are struggling to pay salaries to journalists, their staff, and run the day-to-day operation. So if the situation is left unmitigated, in the future, the real danger of print outlets folding and broadcasters going off air will be real. And then when you come to the second point, reporting challenges, access to information was one of the major challenges of the industry even before COVID-19, but this coronavirus pandemic worsened the access to information challenge, and especially the officials are exploiting these opportunities by not replying to newsrooms through phones and digital platforms. And in our case, there is a partial lockdown to mitigate the spread of the pandemic, and this become an obstacle, to get access to authorities as well. And the due to this, I mean, the quality of reporting has been compromised since the pandemic. So, and this opens up the machining of fake news and disinformation, which hinders the fight against COVID-19, and it's also underestimate our capacity, to debunk fake news and disinformation. And then my third point is about the safety of journalists during this COVID. So due to this complicated nature of the pandemic, journalists are fear to go out on the field for reporting because they might fear that they might contract the pandemic. So because of also the limited financial resources of most of the media houses, they are not providing the PPE, the personal protection equipment to their journalists, like masks, sanitizers, and so on. And also the working from home model is far reaching us. The cost of internet is very expensive in our case, and also the quality of internet is very poor. So this model is not as such, workable in our case as well. And actions taken so far, the state printing house has offered 1 month's credit facility to newspapers in the country. So this is one actions that's taken so far. And there's also another initiative, which is under formation, the Ethiopian Civic Information Consortium, with the aim of mobilizing funds to the media houses. And this consortium involves private medias, public medias, journalist associations, media council, journalism schools, media think tanks, government agencies, and other international donations. So this consortium is under formation. So some players of the industry are taking this initiative. So the way forward that we have seen this, I mean, media houses need to rethink of how to conduct their businesses and needs to strategize to come up with a viable business model to sustain their existence during COVID and beyond, and also establishment of media emergency pool funds and cooperation among the media houses should be mandatory to fight this pandemic. And from my side, this is it. Thank you. I'll just leave the platform for you, George.
All right. Thanks very much, Zacharias. I think we're not doing very well on time. But if you allow me, maybe we will take 3 burning questions for the presenters before we move on to the next session, so that maybe by 11:45, 11:55 rather, we move on to the next session. Please raise up your hand so that I can see you. So the first 3 hands that go up will be allowed to speak. Okay, and Zacharias, please put your hand down because you're one of the presenters, unless you want to ask a question. Okay, there is a fellow at the top. I can see 2 hands. Okay, one is a fellow Jitsa. So I don't know the name, but if you ask your question quickly, fellow Jitsa, there are 2 hands, and then Zacharias. You had your hand up. Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Can I continue?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, this is Zacharias. So I just want to pose one question for the MSF. So, I mean, in Africa, the number of cases are not as predicted, and the recovering rate is also very high. So can we say that Africans have a stronger immunity than the rest of the world regarding COVID-19? This is my question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And Jesse.
You. Mine says it's a small one. There have been a lot of issues regarding the medications and the herbs from this continent of late we heard what happened in Madagascar, that they have come up with the herbs which can help see the sufferings going down. What would you say about this in African perspective regarding these herbs? Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, Jesse. And there is a last question, fellow Jitsa. I cannot, your video is not turned on, so I can't see you, but your hand is up. All right, okay. I think we take those two questions. Roland, do you want to respond quickly, maybe in 1 minute?
Yeah. First of all, saying that Africa has a stronger immunity, for now, as we mentioned before, it's quite difficult to tell why these predictions are not following, or the real result are not following the prediction. It's quite early, and actually, we know that this pandemic. It's new, and even the most experienced doctor in the world is only a few months experienced on COVID, so we can't say much on that. And most of studies are going on, and we cannot say Africa, or we can also say in Europe there are also countries which are not that much affected, while others are very much affected. The same in Asia and so on. Yeah.
All right.
So the second question, I did not get it if it was direct to MSF or and what was it? I did not get it well.
Jesse, who are you?
Yeah. I was saying when people are struggling in different ways in how they can contain COVID-19, we have heard the development in Madagascar, where they have said that they have developed a herb which is helping a lot of people around Madagascar. So I was saying, what's your opinion as a medical expert on this regard? Would you say it's high time we promote it, or what do you think about that? The herbs that have been developed out of continent has been a way of coming down the problem of COVID-19.
Okay, I get your question now clearly. Actually, MSF is a part of the organizations supporting and following a lot of initiatives. Should it be in terms of treatment or vaccines? So at this point, MSF gets normally involved in this treatment of vaccines when it has reached a very high level of the procedure in the development. At this stage, if we cannot say that what has been developed in Madagascar should be promoted or not. But MSF would align behind scientific studies and whatever could help the population, as we have done before. But at this stage, we cannot say anything about what is happening in Madagascar. As you know, every country is sovereign in terms of taking the decision for the health of their staff, for the health of their populations, for the health of their citizens. So each country, each government has the decision on this. And MSF is following what is in the country, but according to what MSF believes can be taken as something which is confirmed, scientifically demonstrated, able to help the communities. That is why in many initiatives like Ebola treatment or Ebola vaccination, we have gone through very strict protocols on what to do, when, and why. And this all goes with informed consent, because population or patients should know exactly what they are taking and why.
Okay, thanks very much, Roland. I think because of time, we must move on. Mashari, I can see your hand is up, but hold on to your question. Maybe we ask that at the end. Thank you very much for everybody. I think to everybody. Now we move on to the next session, which is the safety of journalists. And we have 3 presentations. The first one is by Jesse Kwayu, who's the managing partner, Brain Incorporated Tanzania. Kwayu, the floor is yours.